regards to the LCR meter, the L stands for inductor. Don't ask me why the L stands for inductance. And C is capacitance and R is resistance. It's, for those of you that have any sort of electrical background, it's an impedance meter, and it reads the impedance. And it is microprocessor driven these days. And one way it measures the subject capacitor is by assuming that there is a resistance in series with the capacitor. In other words, when the electricity comes in, it goes through the resistor or through the capacitor, and then it goes through the capacitor and then through the resistor. Doesn't matter what order they're in. The other way of doing it is that you have a capacitor here, and then you have a resistor in parallel with the capacitor, and the results are considerably different. What the LCR meter does is it has two models built into it, neither of which are necessarily totally representative of the capacitor, but they're close enough for, as I like to say, government work. If you pick the wrong one, you can get very skewed results that are not indicative of reality. And some of the discussion was over that matter, which is the proper model to use in evaluating the capacitor.
Okay. Look, your points are sorry, if you're going to comment, just so others can hear, use the mic, please. Give it a go.
Hello?
I think so. Yep. I can hear you.
Dick said unequivocally that the results that you get whether parallel or series.
Sorry, do you want to switch the switch on? It looks like it's on off mode.
Or just speak into the mic. Dick says unequivocally that the results that he gets at 100 hertz or 100,000 or 10 hertz are not germane in themselves. They're only germane as being comparative to previous layers. So he has some starting point. If he measures one at X and the next one at 1.5X, he knows he's on the right track. If it goes down to 0.8X, he knows he's on the wrong track. The use to ascribe any value to DC capacitance by measuring AC is the height of ridiculousness, technically. Roger, do you agree? Dick has said that. I don't agree that the use of the LCR meter in the AC, and it's only an AC measurement device.
I think the tax view on that is that the LCR continues to be a way of first-level screening, and if it doesn't show promise under the basic frequencies being measured at, it's not going to show promise in a DC mode. It's not definitive what the ultimate number is.
And the key word there is screening. If you go back to the TESCOM results from last September, going from 100 cycles AC to 500 volts DC, or 700 volts, whatever it was, there can be a 5,000 to 1 differential in permittivity.
Right.
That's not something that you can ignore. And it seems to me you're sitting there looking at 100 cycles.
Greg, you're forgetting or not giving us credit for the fact that we sent these. We never got access to a layer until our first layers that we ever got access mid-October of last year. So we never actually had layers ourselves to take outside the facility. We immediately sent them off to one testing facility that, quite frankly, couldn't get any of the results, couldn't replicate the results, and we were unsure if it was their testing or just the fact couldn't replicate the results because they weren't the same. So we sent them off to our consultant, John Galvani, took them to a facility and did his own testing and still struggled. And then we, through eStore and Lockheed, were introduced to Dave Evans of Evans Capacitors, and he believed he could fairly simply measure energy in and energy out, and these sorts of things. And he's a supplier of military-grade capacitors, and you have to believe to almost all the major defense contractors, and you have to believe he has some idea of what he's doing and has impressed us with his knowledge. And we reported after that Dave had done his work and could not find any meaningful energy storage in the layers that he did. I mean, we could provide more detail and pay him for his report, but quite frankly, we wanted to save the many thousands of dollars would have had to pay to publish it, because the results are the same and the methodology is actually not that complex that he used. So, look, we are incented to get the best information out, and we will do that, but we're a public company, and if we're going to make claims about what something can do, we need to be able to replicate it, and we need professionals who have the expertise to stand behind it. Look, we're going to be out raising money, so those who are optimistic and understand some of the vagaries of testing and the process hopefully will be stepping up and investing more, because we're going to need it to keep this ball rolling. But I don't think we have failed to consider those issues. We've taken the input of some very, very smart people, and until they tell us those are numbers that the public should take comfort in, I think it'd be very dangerous to put them out there. That doesn't mean the debate is not healthy, and maybe at the right time we should get Dick, into a dialogue to share his views, but first level is convincing the TAC.
Oh, hi, Jim. I'm probing Gail. Actually, Ian and I are founders of
It's the first year you haven't done the proposing or seconding of the motion.
Yes, I was a chief technology officer when we initially started out. And I think, based on what Greg just said, I was speaking with Ian the other day, and I actually told him I really don't read the blogs because, there's so much going on. But I think that based on what Greg sort of alluded to and what probably, the bloggers will end up saying, I'm not sure, I'm trying to see if I can get some clarification, and which maybe will help people to understand something, because fundamentally, it seems to me that there's a serious disconnect in communication with Dick and the team. Because if Dick is doing some testing and getting some results, it would seem to me that if someone's going to test, at least Dick is going to have to show them what he did, and they duplicate it, or to see if what he did makes any sense. So I don't really, to me it would have seemed, when we first, in terms of the acquisition, it seemed to me that everything that Dick had basically presented as a result would have been looked at, and perhaps, because that was really sort of what was really in the basket at the moment. And I'm not quite sure if that has happened and to what extent Dick has input in any test that's going to happen, because it's either Dick has, is he competent or not? And essentially, if he has a test result, then he should at least have some input in any testing that's taking place to get to see if there's a similarity. Now, if the process that Dick uses is not a good process, then the person could say, well, we don't like that process, but at least we would know. But right now, we don't know if Dick, where's the disconnect in what Dick has said and in terms of what you're finding?
Okay. Well, look, I actually don't think there's a lack of communication. As to what we're testing, we have not focused on historical layers, and that's actually at Dick's request, but it's also because we have to focus our limited financial and human resources, and we've considered the most important thing, because Dick is an optimist, an eternal optimist, is getting him to produce new layers and testing them as they're produced, so you've got real-time current information. Part of the reason Dick wasn't a fan of going back and testing is that he took the epoxy as far as he could and realized it had its limitations. He took the PVA and had this hydrology issue, basically water percolating surface, and that limited its usefulness, and he believes that there's no point going back and testing formulations that he knows have limitations, and we need to focus on what we can do with the current, what he would call matrix, but it's based on a PVC thing. As to the testing itself, the TAC doesn't do the testing other than when we specifically ask for some specific role. But generally, we're using the machines, the equipment in eStore's facilities. In Jamin, we never have the testing done by one person on their own. There's always a second person to validate it, just as a good practice protocol. But Dick is always involved in the testing. We haven't put out any result where he probably hasn't either been holding the layer and doing the testing himself or overseeing it. So he's absolutely the guy. There's no argument, actually, about how we're testing, and no disagreement about the tests we're doing. Dick may argue that you should go further in the frequency band, or that other numbers are relevant, but he hasn't been able to convince the TAC yet that numbers beyond the sort of band we've disclosed are ones that people should feel comfortable relying on. And but he is involved and does the testing. Sir?
Honey, we couldn't hear you.
I was just thanking Jim because at least I think there was a bit of a misunderstanding. I didn't understand really what Dick's input would be at this point, so at least I'm glad for that clarification.
Gary Johnson, Queen's University. Thank you very much for your hard work. And this is kind of a worst case scenario, which might be the guy to bring that out, but suppose
I went to Queen's twice, so don't hurt me too hard.
Okay.
7 years less a day for good behavior, as I say in Kingston.
So if the funding runs out, what would happen to the IP? Maybe this is a dumb question, and should the IP be marketed or something like that? Just a totally different direction. I really would like to go back to some of the technical stuff too, because I feel I could never get enough reliable information on tech. I would go to Story, and that's the best I could do. But that's another story. But anyways, should the
look? One of the question is, what do we do if we run out of funds? That's it's the analogy I use with the board and management is it feels like you're on a runway with a plane, and you can see the end of the runway, and that's not a lot of fun. And when you hit the end of the runway, it's not a good experience. So before we hit the end of the runway, we are exploring everything, including what we can do with the technology itself. My day job prior to doing this, and this has become day and night and weekend job, it's been buying and selling companies and helping them raise capital and doing mergers and doing partnership agreements. And I don't believe in its current form with the technology where it is that we get good value for the company if we put it up for sale today or try to just sell the technology. Maybe you'd get something, but it wouldn't be very attractive. I guess if we get to the very end and that's our only choice, it's something we'll have to consider. But we really think that a way better path is what we're trying to do, which is to get partners in. And what leverage we have in negotiating with those partners will depend on where the technology is when we come to, hopefully sign some agreements.